We've got a great topic we're going to be talking about. Of course, I am monitoring the chat today. And don't forget, level up every day. Hey everybody, my name is Matt Pierce. I'm the Learning and Video Ambassador for TechSmith, and we're here to talk with you guys about animated GIFs. They're not just for fun, although they are a lot of fun. But before we get into that with our guest, Daniel Foster, a couple things I just want to remind you about. First thing, we do have our TechSmith Academy, which is a free resource, online learning that you can go and check out. It's got some really great resources if you're learning how to make video, you want to learn about working with subject matter experts, you want to learn how to get better on camera. Lots of stuff out there. Again, it's all free. Do go check it out. You can check it out at academy.techsmith.com, or if you want to learn just more information, go to techsmith.com/academy. Of course, we've always got things going on. New release of Camtasia came out a couple weeks ago, a new product called Audiate. And of course, we got Snagit 2020 that's been out for a little while. So if you haven't checked out any of those products, please do. And of course, today we're going to be taking questions. So if you've got questions that you want to ask us, go ahead and put them in the chat and let us know. We'll do our best to answer all the questions that we can, because we do see out there. I even see there's a question already about Camtasia music non-copyrighted. And I can answer that question real quick. It's if you're getting it from what's in Camtasia, you are free to use that. Of course, always be checking with things. You want to make sure you're not using music that is copyrighted, but stuff in Camtasia is available for you guys to use. So with that said, we're going to find the right switcher here, and we're going to welcome Daniel Foster to our program today. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me.
You bet. Happy to be here. Thanks for welcoming me on, Matt.
Yeah. This is awesome. And Daniel, we're gonna get started with this because my guess is people are like, Daniel Foster. I don't know who's Daniel Foster. And if you've not interacted with him, it's your loss because Daniel's awesome. Daniel, what's your role at TechSmith, and what kind of things are you overseeing, doing, thinking about these days?
So my history at TechSmith goes back to 2007, and I've had a few different roles in marketing and content, and now I'm on the product side. So what I get to do now is mainly for Snagit, but across the product somewhat, talk to people about how they're using it, research how we should be bending the products to new applications in the future, and suggesting kind of new problems to solve out there in the marketplace. So that we can provide more value and help you guys all work more efficiently. That's really the goal.
And Daniel, you are no stranger to animated GIFs, right? Like, whoa, I said GIFs. Is that okay? I know people are still debating this.
Yeah, you know what tends to come out of my mouth is GIF, and the reason for that is graphics interchange format, and so I just go with the graphic GIF. But I'm not going to hate on anybody who says GIF.
Nope,
it's fine.
Nope, because
I like
Jiffy peanut butter, so, Jif works for me too, but yeah, I had to get that out of the way, right? But Daniel and I actually worked, we so I guess we could count ourselves founding members of the social media team at TechSmith. Daniel really did the work. I just said, hey, let's do this. But you've been using animated GIFs for a long time, right?
Yeah, I've loved using them internally. We would use them in share-outs, partly just for comedic effect, honestly, mostly, but kind of to set the tone when doing a slide share internally with stakeholders. And then I started getting interested in more, I guess, businessy applications, more serious applications. And one of the groups that I talk to a lot is folks that do technical content, so technical writers, trainers, anyone who's sort of teaching and training on a technical topic. And what I started seeing was marketers first were starting to adopt GIFs for kind of serious business, and they were often using them to maybe show off some new functionality in the product, maybe just give an illustration or overview of their product. But that sparked my interest, because being a marketer by background, I noticed this pattern where marketers are just like, I don't know, you could call them like the raccoons or the scavengers of the industry, where we're just like quick to find like the best things, and wherever we see them, latch onto them and try them. And so I was like, ooh, this has potential. Let's see where it goes next.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you said something I think is really important here, is that you started using them for serious work. Like, because here's the thing. I know if you've been on Twitter, you've been on Facebook, you've been anywhere pretty much on the internet. You've either seen, if you're old enough, you've either seen the like under construction sign animated GIFs, or you've seen a response to somebody, the Michael Jackson eating the popcorn, an office GIF, whatever it might be, right? Like we see it for these other kind of entertainment value, communication value. Like it's got communication value, but it's kind of silly. But you said it's for serious stuff.
Yeah, because those fun gifts, what is the purpose of them? I'm a communication major, so I ask these kind of questions. That's my background too. But they're really to evoke that moment, right? And so by giving this little gif, you can like convey a whole emotion or a whole like nod to some moment in cultural, history. And I think that when you pivot to using these in marketing and then really in technical communication, you might be wanting someone to feel something. And so I think where I saw that first was like, I started noticing I'd get all these emails and I would open the email and something was moving inside the email, without me clicking anything. And it was really like, maybe just a little shimmer. Maybe it was like some glitter falling in the background, whatever. It was meant to really just catch your eye and sort of like make you feel a little bit of something by seeing that. And I think that's one way. And that's a serious use because you can actually kind of help, give an emotional response. And then I think on the technical side, the way I would think about what work that GIF is doing is typically it's actually showing you like a series of steps. It's showing you like do this, then do this, then do this. And so it's a little more not trying to evoke an emotion, but actually like convey some information.
Yeah, I love the idea, like, there's early said that like, it could just be something little, right? Like you're drawing attention, you're drawing focus, which as a marketer is a big deal. You're trying to draw in people. You want them. Look, we know it's hard to get attention. We know it's hard to get people to read emails, but yeah, it makes sense of like you can get a little bit of attention, and they all of a sudden if you draw them, then maybe there's a chance they're going to read your message or do something. So it sounds like so for anyone that's watching, it sounds like we've animated GIFs. We got the serious thing. It's not so serious now. We can use it a little bit seriously, but I know you have thought a lot about the different ways you could use animated GIFs to enhance kind of your communication best practices. So we can definitely go through that list. We've talked a little bit about the why to do it, draw attention, show something off. But before we get too far, are there like inherent bias downsides to, using GIFs that we should be like out of the gate, just be aware these are the problems?
So there've been limitations. It's interesting on social platforms. A lot of the platforms just didn't support them for years. And we've seen that change over the last, 3-5 years where pretty much everything supports GIFs now. And that's good. There are still some platform limitations. It's really email clients. And it's one email client in particular, and that is Microsoft Outlook on Windows and only the installed client. So the way that one handles animated GIFs that are embedded in an email is it just shows you the first frame. So that hasn't stopped email marketers from using them, and it shouldn't stop you either. I think what that makes you do is think, well, what is that first frame of this GIF? And if that first frame does at least some of the work of the GIF, and maybe you have a link underneath that says like not animating, click here. There is a kind of a workaround you can do, and just have that GIF hosted somewhere, whether it's screencast.com or any kind of file share or place online. So that's one limitation I would say to just think about. On the plus side, all the mobile email clients, including Outlook, work. On Mac it works. On webmail it works. It's like it works almost everywhere. So, but there's just that one exception, and it happens to be a popular client. Another real disadvantage I would say, or a thing to just really consider, is accessibility. So anytime you have an image, of course, right, you got to think about accessibility, and there's standards like alt tags. So if you have a web page and you're putting an image on it, you should have an alt tag that describes what's in that graphic, right? And it's no different for a GIF. If you're putting it on a web page, have an alt tag, and even list out there, you can list the steps. But I would say that honestly, one of the ways that I see animated GIFs used most frequently is more like it adds something. It's a visual aid, so it's not doing all the work. It's accompanying text, and that text should be still screen readable for accessibility reasons.
Yeah, so I mean that's what it's very rare do we find something that's so ubiquitous, right? Something that can go almost everywhere. I mean, except for the one instance of email clients, but it works on the web. It works, in a lot of apps if you're working in Slack or, one of the many kind of clones of Slack, right? It works. So it
Yeah.
does feel like from that perspective, this is something that can be utilized pretty readily along with words or I mean even sometimes I think video, right? Like I was talking to a colleague of mine, Sam Rogers, and he was giving a presentation, and one of the things he said about is like why use a video when an animated GIF will do, especially if you're constrained on bandwidth, right? Like if you're working with folks that are out in the bandwidth just sucks, well maybe an animated GIF will work where a video would be a terrible slow experience.
Yeah, I think the bandwidth issue related to that is sort of, you have a pair of headphones on. Maybe you're working in an environment where you can't play back audio because your system doesn't have a capacity, or it's loud and you just can't, or whatever. So a GIF is really that kind of visual thing you can just follow with one channel, right? Just visual, and still be able to extract the meaning from it. I think that, kind of thinking about like where to draw that line between video and animated GIF. One thing I think is a little bit of a red herring is, some people will say, well, why not just use an MP4 and embed that on a web page and have it loop? And I'm like, do it. Like it's the same thing, right? The format kind of doesn't matter. If the destination supports either one, use the one that works best, has the smallest file size, is going to function best for your customers or users. A nice thing about a GIF is that it's already playing. Like on a web page, when you get to that part of the page, it's already moving. And again, thinking with that marketing hat on, every time you ask someone to click, there's attrition,
Right.
right? The percentage of people who are on that page is bigger than the percentage of people who are going to click that button. So you've already sort of lost part of your audience if you really want them to engage with that content. So a GIF, is already moving. Of course, that's also what can make them annoying. And we all remember the early days of the web where it was just slather all kinds of moving things all over the sides of pages. So there are some best practices about, don't have too many of them in a row, too many too close together. Make them short because they don't have a play button. They don't have a slider that you can drag back and forth. And so you need to have it short so it repeats quickly. So if you didn't catch it, you can just watch and it'll come back again. So there are some good affordance kind of things to think through like that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Daniel, what I want to do is I want to make sure we're spending some time thinking about, because my guess is there's going to be someone who's going to watch this and they're going to say like, I like the idea. It makes sense to me what you're saying so far. I understand the limitations, but like, when would I really want to use a GIF? What are some of the scenarios? And I know you've spent a lot of time talking through this, so let's maybe look at some of these things here. And I can tell me when you want me to share your screen because we can do that anytime.
Yeah, let's bring that up. I have one that I loaded.
Yeah, hang 1 second, Daniel. I want to make sure that your audio is coming through. I think it is, but I'm not positive when I shared the screen that it did. So if someone's
Okay.
watching on YouTube, real quick, we got the delay here. If you'll make
Yeah.
sure that when we switch to the screen, if you could hear Daniel, if not, give us a thumbs up, tell us something that gives us an indication, because I'm not seeing the meter, which is interesting. I
Okay.
might have to add it we'll keep talking though. Okay, so we got Help Scout. We've got this
Sure.
example. We'll get the visuals here going so I don't have to try to narrate your whole process.
Yeah.
But tell us a little
You're
bit
doing a
about
lot
it.
of things live
Yeah,
there.
this is what I say every week. This
Yeah.
is what happens when you do something live, right? Inherently, you're going to run into problems. You're going to see things, and you're going to be like, "Oh crap, I messed that up. Didn't test that well enough." So, uh, Daniel Smith
What?
says no audio. So
No audio
when we're
for
on the
me. Okay.
screen, so let me go ahead and talk about the Help Scout example a little bit more, and I'll get something set up here for us so we can share it. I
Sure.
hope.
Sure. Yeah. So really what we've got here is my point bringing this one up is that it sort of combines the best of both worlds, or all three, I would say, which is text and video and this animated GIF format. And so you've got a text article. At the top of it, you actually have a video.
Make sure no precious
that that walks through some of how to use this product and gives you the overview of this topic. And that's great. You can interact with that in that medium if that's the one you want. But you can also just read through, and you're going to get images and text kind of alternating, pretty standard sort of document style. You come down here and you see that this image happens to be moving. And so you can ask, like, why is that? Why is this one animated? Well, the reason that they decided to use an animated GIF here is because this is really an interaction that they're trying to show. And it's really hard to, it's really hard to show that interaction if you can't have motion, right? If you can't have it animated. So I think that's just really critical to to keep in mind as far as like when would you want to use a GIF in this context.
Yeah, and we do have screen and audio now, so I got that figured out. So we should be good. So we are seeing Help Scout. Yeah. So I mean, you said something that caught my mind as I was trying to frantically do everything. But you talked about that the combination of things, that it wasn't just a GIF, it's text, and like. Is that normally true of when you're using animated GIFs, to use them all together, or should we be thinking about them? Can we think about them standalone, or should we always be trying to combine them with these other elements? I guess, I mean, maybe there's no right answer. Usually there's not a right answer. It always depends. But is that kind of like best practice? Usually you want it to have other context, other information.
I think, honestly, where I see things being used more often than not, they do accompany other information. I can think of some examples where I myself have made a GIF that really just stood alone. And, that might be if I'm sending a quick tip to, how to do something technically. Think about like, telling your mom how to set her settings on Facebook, right? Sometimes it's just like, I'm not writing an article. My whole point is I want to get back to doing whatever I was doing and just answer this question as quick as I can. And that's the same in the workplace. So in those cases, I think just, a really quick looping how-to can stand alone and will be fine. One thing I wanted to point out about this GIF, and I think it's a great example, is it's short, right? I haven't counted this out, but it's probably like 10 seconds or less. And it's really only showing a couple of things. It's showing how to grab that move handle and drag this one box above the other box. And so I think those are two really good principles to keep in mind when using a GIF, is keep it short, partly for those reasons I mentioned earlier of, the longer it is, then the more frustrated somebody is going to be if they can't like stop it, pause it, scrub through it.
Right.
And also it's just, you're just really trying to show like, a quick thing, here's this one thing or this series of maybe 2 to 6 steps that you can watch really quickly. So I love that example for that reason.
Well, it seems like I mean, this is where if we get into like educational psychology and working memory and all the things, like there's only so much you can contain in your short-term memory, and if you're showing 20 things, there's no way you're going to remember those 20 things. But like one thing dragging up seems like it's very memorable. Because I know I have to look at videos like I'm trying to follow along. I have to rewind all the time. So no, I think that's great advice. So so we talked about a series of steps. What other kind of things should we be using as GIFs? Where do GIFs kind of fall in that sweet spot? What else could we be making to improve our communication, improve our work, helping people, things like that?
Here's another one, and this gets just slightly nerdy for a moment, right? Which is technical communication. People have to think about languages and localization. And anytime you make a graphic, you're thinking like, do I have to make 16 of this graphic for all the languages that I support? Or can I just do one and have it work? So this is an article from Google Help, Google Maps, and it's a language that I do not speak. But I can scroll down here and scroll down this animation that they put together. Showing how to do this one little motion, in Maps. It's kind of a zoom out, to be able to see more, zoom in. I can follow that. I don't even have to speak the language. And so they've done a couple of things. They've abstracted out the language by using this kind of simplified interface. And we talk a lot about that at TechSmith too. But then they've made this animation and plunked it into this article, and they can use that same animation. And I don't know how many languages Google supports, but it's probably 40 or more. And they only have to make that once. So I think that's another real benefit or real area where these animations can help, especially if you can kind of abstract away the text.
No, I mean, that's that highly reusable is awesome, because I know I was reading part of a Slack group, and it's a lot of folks who are in customer education today, and you know, they were talking about some of these conversations about the challenges of staying up to date, like keeping content up to date. And they were talking about how they wanted to move mostly to text, because text is inherently flexible. You can update it relatively quickly, whereas when you have media, it becomes a lot more challenging. But even something like this, because you can use it across 50, 100, all the languages, as long as that's the concept of people have that concept. But they could also they're only updating this little piece compared to a whole long video or even 20 screenshots. It's like, it's not the same, right?
Yeah. Keeping it short can help with that for sure. One thing I want to point out is, a lot of these examples I'm showing here are screen-based, kind of technology-based. But there are some other examples that I love. This one is from eHow, and this is showing a how-to that is very not technical. I don't know if anybody else is finding right now that they're doing a lot more crafting, a lot more baking. I know we are at our house, all kinds of
all the baking.
Creativity going on. And so this one I just think is really cool, because as you go through here, it's really simple. What they've done is, for each step, they took a series of pictures, right? Picture, do a little more, picture, do a little more, picture. And then they just, animated those like a little slideshow through, but you can kind of see this thing being built out. So as you go, you get a real idea of how to go about this process. And you wouldn't, you could sit down and watch the whole video, but I'm a person who really likes to just kind of skip through and be like, I get that part. But this thing with the pliers, like, what are you doing to break them? And, oh, okay, I see. Like, you just give it a little twist and it breaks. So I think that this is a really nice approach too, and it's pretty simple. Anyone can do it. You just, think about it, whether it's photos or whether it's screenshots. It's possible just to think about putting them in a row, one after another, and how much time is each one visible on the screen, and that is an animated GIF, right? That's a way to build that.
Right. It's like building out an animation. You're just saying what kind of steps and what are logical jumps to show versus having to show every single frame in perfect continuity, right? Like, oh, you're going to get this part, you're going to get this part, and you can make logical. The brain's pretty good about filling in, I think, those gaps for us.
Yeah, and I will say that leads me actually a really nice segue. This is an example from Apple, and I think, one of the pitfalls you can have, and, I love getting to pick on Apple. Usually they do everything so perfectly, but, and this is my opinion, so whatever, you can differ. But, this is cool, but I feel like it's really hard to follow because I can't see the gesture. So they didn't bother to put in like a little dot or a finger. A finger looks a little weird usually, but like a dot is a really nice, way to do this, to follow. And so I think that's true with any animation where you're trying to give some instruction or some information. You have to understand like what's happening and be able to follow along with the action. So this is one where they kind of did it with both of these, where I think it would be improved by having that little visual cue of here's where the finger is, in these gestures and interactions.
No, that makes total sense, right? Like that context matters a lot, and then there's indicators. It seems like you're right. Floating fingers. That's all I can think about. Is just how weird that would be to be floating across the screen. But with that said, especially if you don't understand, most people have probably seen an Apple product at this point. But if you were new to this concept, or you're unfamiliar with what they might be doing, it would be extremely hard because there is no indicator. And even with the animated GIF you showed before, the crafting stuff, right? Like, what if they showed kind of like a plier clip, but they didn't show you the twist, or they didn't give you any further information, right? You wouldn't know. How would you know?
Yeah, so I think that, and that's probably a good principle of all this kind of communication, right? Which is putting yourself in the steps of that total new learner and trying to wipe the curse of knowledge as much as you can and really think like, what did I need to know and what did I assume was true before I really knew this process?
Right. So Daniel, I want to hang on 1 second. Let me just throw this up here, guys. Everyone out there, if you are watching, that we are watching the chat, thanks for confirming about audio today. Go ahead and put questions in there. Ask Daniel a question about animated GIFs. You can even tell us what your favorite animated GIF is, or one that you've made that you thought was super helpful, or one that you've seen that was super helpful. Let us know in the chat. One thing I want to point out too is we got a great blog post about this out on the TechSmith blog. I'm going to throw that into the chat there so you guys can see it, so you get more information about working with GIFs and using them. Later on, I think if Daniel agrees, we'll put in he's got a webinar that he did. You do have to sign up for it. It's on a different site, but it was great information all about using animated GIFs. A lot of the similar information kind of condensed into a video format. Should have been an animated GIF. So again, let us know if you got any questions here. So just, want to make sure people know they can ask questions. But so we've seen a couple examples, really good examples, different examples. The Apple one is interesting because probably very high quality, yet maybe lacking some information. What other uses or what else you got to show us here about animated GIFs that you think would be valuable?
So I think, we've kind of talked about steps and following along with a process, but I think there are some other sort of big top level categories where GIFs can be really useful. This is an example that I think, again, it's kind of real world. This is a blog post from a place called Premium Beat, now owned by Shutterstock. They were just doing content marketing, right? At the time, they were trying to say, here's how to learn some new topic that's related to our brand. As part of that, though, they've created what I think is one of the best illustrations I've ever seen of the f-stop. So if you ever tried to learn photography, you're like, okay, this is weird. The smaller the number, the bigger the aperture or the shutter opening and vice versa. And so this is like, oh, I get it,
Yeah.
And obviously this one was not something that they just captured. They had to build this. So they had to use, I don't know if they used Illustrator or some kind of a graphic program, but, they kind of built it from scratch. And so I think that's another thing to note is another way you can make GIFs is to build them from scratch. But another reason you'd want to is this cause and effect. And I think if you scroll down, there's another really great example, and this is showing depth of field. So all these root beer bottles lined up, and you can see as they change the f-stop, how that changes the focal depth for this shot.
Yeah.
And it's like, I get it, cause and effect. You put those two things together and you show them unmistakably.
No, what a great, I've been working with video and film and all that stuff for quite a while, but these are very clear, good examples because they're hard to explain, right? Just telling somebody or writing, heaven forbid, trying to type that out would be crazy difficult. But that, yeah, right. So I love that cause and effect. I think that's a great use of it.
We see Autodesk, back to a technology example here. They do this in some of their documentation and I love how they've abstracted out just the one panel. That's another really great principle here is they didn't try to do the full screen and you're like, I don't know where to look. There's stuff all over the place. They really just took like, here's the panel with the controls and here's what it's changing. And they put those right side by side and you can just see like, oh, I'm toggling this thing or I'm moving this thing. And here's exactly how I don't know what this is, a bug or some kind of a 3D, little critter that they've made. But I think that's, again, just a really nice little illustration. It shows how quick it is. They're just showing the one step. It's back and forth. They have a few of these sprinkled throughout with the text. So it's a way of kind of backing up and illustrating the principles that they're teaching about do this, and that's what the result is.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I don't think I've really thought about this before, but what it affords them, where I think a lot of times, like I'm making videos, and I think about showing that full context of the screen because I need to orient somebody. Like I need to say, like, if you're up here in the menu, maybe I'm on the toolbar of Snagit, and I need to show somebody where effects panel is or something like that. Like there's this whole big thing, right? But this is affording them like these, like, let's just assume the basic interface, but we just want to show how properties work. And I think
Yeah.
that's really an interesting thing. I hadn't thought about how to put that together, or that would make a great GIF, but it does. Like, again, cause and effect, right? Like, do this. I don't need to teach you where those things are in this instance. I just need to help you understand, like, if I change this, this is what happens. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. A real world version of that here is, you cut onions at home. I'm sure everyone's cooking right now a lot at home. And this was in a blog post, and it basically was showing the difference between two techniques for cutting an onion. And I've never really thought that much. Only a time I ever think about cutting onions is when I'm like, there has to be a better way. I'm pretty sure I'm doing this the worst way possible. But the top is like, okay, here's the typical way that people will do this in a restaurant if they're a chef. And then the bottom way is here's kind of this new method this other chef that they were interviewing uses. And again, I think that getting really close to the action, they've taken out actually some of the steps. They've actually reduced this process down to its essentials, and I think that's another great principle. And then just showing you, as quick as you can, going through that over and over, you're like, I can really cement that in, and I could probably do that next time I cut an onion, and hopefully not cut my fingers.
It's always a risk when I'm cutting anything, but yeah. Again, and I'm assuming that these were pulled out of context of other things around the blog post, right? So there'd be other information, but still being able to see, even without that context, the kind of side by side is really nice, because you can see the difference. And at the end, and I guess end result, you still get chopped onions, but maybe one's safer or faster or something like that. So
if you're doing a lot of them, you might really want the speed pickup there.
Yeah, for sure. So we got some cause and effect. I wrote down, because this is how I work your list, right? Yes. I know you've got a few more examples, but I've got I can ask you about some of these, whatever you want to do next. Yeah. So.
Well, I guess while we're on cause and effect, let me do one more that's related to that, because I think it's really similar. And then I'm interested to hear some of your questions too. So this one is the before and after, right? And these are real world examples again. And it's again another style of GIF. The one on the left is sort of this wipe. And so it's literally just two pictures with a wipe transition. Like if you were needing to do that in Camtasia or something, you could absolutely do that just with two photos. And the one on the right is just like a fade transition between them. And you have the text, before and after. And I just love that these two, also give you this really quick. And the one on the left, you're just like jaw dropping. Like, seriously, that's the from hovel to mansion. There, it's really nice makeover. And that the picnic table. I mean, granted, I don't get that excited about picnic tables, but that's also pretty cool. But I think that's another great use, right? And it's kind of related to the cause and effect. It's more like just a point in time. Here's what it was. Here's how it is today, and you can very easily compare those two. Yeah,
for sure. Although it's got me wondering. I look at that house one. Why are they burning stuff too? I mean, what's good? What happened? What is this story? It's pulling me in. I want to know, what did those folks do?
I know, right? I'm pretty sure they picked the worst photo that they could find ever taken of that house for the before. So, there's that.
Yeah, but again, I love that. I mean, in probably 5-7 frames, you're telling this story. And I think, right. I mean, oftentimes, and people that listen to me speak ever, they'll know that I talk a lot about story and the importance of story. But I think that makes it's really interesting with so little how much gets conveyed. Now, there's a whole bunch that we don't know. Like, we don't know why they're burning the fire. We don't know what motivated them to do changes and what changes had to happen. But what a great way to lead me in and engage me, yeah. Right? Whether that's in an email or whether that's, in some help documentation about like how you can manipulate whatever. I think that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I think about that with our content. Imagine showing, here's the video that you may have had before, and here's what you could do later. I know we've even worked on stuff like that, the Screen Champ Award from back in the day, where, it was like, hey, let us help you kind of do this makeover to your content. And I think that's a really great entry point because it's so visual and it does make you curious. All right, now I want to know the process. You showed me the beginning and the end, and now I want to know what's in the middle because maybe I want to try to do that on my own. So yeah, a lot of power there.
Yeah, for sure. So let me ask you about a couple of these other ones. And in your you've got a slide share. We can get the link and put out there as well if you'd like.
Yep.
But in this, as I was looking through, a couple that stood out to me. One was, I think, really relevant to today, given circumstances. You know, a lot of people are forced to work remotely. But if you have someone new coming onto a team, or there's like onboarding and walkthroughs, seems pretty obvious. Basically, you can show cause and effect, you can show stuff. But anything else you would say about like onboarding as using animated GIFs for that purpose? Because it does seem it's like it would be super valuable right now as we're not all together.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think I think the variation on the theme there is, and I talk about this as like peer-to-peer tech support. Is we're all answering questions for each other. I spend time doing Zoom office hours for Snagit every week, and one of the guys I've gotten to know, Dave from Minnesota, he supports these guys that they had a group that they would meet at a restaurant weekly, and it's a little bit on the older end of the spectrum, guys, and they're all like suddenly trying to meet by Zoom, and so he's got to be tech support for like this network of his social network group. So. I think that all of us are experiencing that, whether it's with colleagues or with family or whatever. And I do think that being able to boil down the little process, those steps into a quick GIF is super helpful. Kind of the flip side of that is the bug report, right? And that's okay, it's not working the way I thought it should work. And how do I show you that it's not? I don't know about, that it's, if you ever watched IT Crowd.
Yeah.
They pick up the phone and they're like, have you tried turning it off and back on, or have you unplugged it and plugged it back in, or whatever he says every time. So there's often that sort of with developers or IT, there's just a little native skepticism, right? Of like, okay, you say there's a problem, but maybe it's something really obvious, or maybe from your description, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so an animated GIF can really help with that, where it's like unmistakably clear. Here's what's going on. Yes, it's real. And there still may be questions that you have to ask to diagnose and get to the root of it, but at least it shows so much better and easier than trying to describe what the problem is.
Well, and you can send it via email, right? Like we talked about earlier, you can not only show it, but you can send it. It actually works, and whereas video might be too big.
Yeah. Throw it on the email, or Slack, or we're using Teams now at TechSmith. Whatever your internal kind of IM platform is, right? GIFs are great because you can just drag them. If you're using Snagit to create them, you just drag them out of the tray and drag it right over into Teams, and you don't have to really touch the file and mess around with it. So that's super convenient.
We're going to come back to a question I was going to ask, because you mentioned Snagit, so I want to get in talking to about the practical, like what can we use Snagit, Camtasia, what are the limitations, what kind of things we can do. But before we end today, I want you to share like a favorite GIF that's it's just a fun one, right? Like maybe you use it often. But before we do that, let's talk about Snagit, because you've worked with Snagit for a long time. I know it's something that you're very familiar with, but we can talk about Camtasia, what it can do. So if someone is a Snagit user that's watching this, I know it can make animated GIFs, but why don't we walk through, like, what are some of the things you should be thinking about? How would you go about setting up those types of questions?
Sure. At a high level, there's really kind of two ways. Camtasia is like an infinite creation board, right? I mean, you can put anything you want on the canvas. You have multiple tracks. You have time, you have depth, you have so much that you can put on there, and anything that you can put in Camtasia on the timeline and have as video or animation, you can output it as an animated GIF, just like you could save it as an MP4. Of course, if you have audio, the audio isn't going to get sent to the GIF because GIFs don't have audio. Again, not recommended for video length, 3 minutes, 10 minutes. Like, forget it. Like, the GIF is totally the wrong format for that. But I have used Camtasia to make GIFs, and one of the nice things it gives you is a lot of control over sort of the settings of making the GIF and how you want the color, how many colors, color depth, that kind of thing. And of course, you can have so much creativity with what you put on the canvas in the first place.
Yeah, so we're talking it's a whole big deal, right? Like you've got all these parts and pieces. I mean, some of the GIFs that you showed, you probably couldn't make in Snagit, like with the transition wipes, like one revealing picture over the other. But you could do that in Camtasia, especially now, Camtasia 2020 with alpha tracks or alpha mats and stuff like that. There's some pretty cool stuff I think we could make. But you have to understand some artistry of it. As you mentioned, length. I mean, is there recommended kind of, I know it always depends, but like how long should 15 seconds? What's like your max end for GIFs that you're making?
I tend to say 30 seconds. It's amazing, though, when you actually are trying to show someone a little process, how quick that 30 seconds goes. You're like, oh, I feel like it was a 10-second thing, but it wasn't. And that, again, is where, with Camtasia and with being able to kind of zoom in on that timeline, one of the things you can do is you can apply clip speed to a section. You can really carve out anything that's, not needed. And I think that's worth that time investment. If it's a GIF that's going to go to like a lot of customers, it's going to live a long time in your documentation, whatever, do that work, make it sort of perfect and just super succinct. But I tend to, just a short answer to your question is like 30 seconds feels like plenty long. And ideally, it's more like 4 or 5 to 10, 12, is kind of a sweet spot.
Yeah, it feels like if you get much longer, going back to what we said earlier, you're just going to run into problems where people they're going to be frustrated because they can't, like step 1 or 2 or whatever was shown in the first 10 seconds. Now they're in the 30 seconds. Now I got to wait again for it to come all the way around to have to get that information. Right. Okay. Yeah, so we'll say Camtasia is a wide open slate. Let's talk about Snagit, because I feel like it's probably much more accessible if you've never made a GIF before, you've never made a video before. Fairly easy to make a GIF in Snagit, right?
Yeah, so there's really a couple ways that you can go about making a GIF in Snagit in terms of like what you're starting with and the starting content. So I'm going to show you, I'll show you sort of the slide-based one first, which is to think about, I have a series of images that I want to show you one after another, right, in series, and I'm going to sort of control how long each one is on the screen. I'm going to try to pace it so that you can follow along. But what it does is it just gives you kind of these frames one after another, and then it repeats so that you can see the process again. So this is an example that I set up. It's using some screenshots of Zoom. The overall how-to is how to secure your Zoom settings so people don't Zoom on you.
Right.
That happened. It's terrible. So you want to try to avoid that. So this is like a title slide. I took something from one of the Snagit templates to kind of make this computer frame here, and I stole the style from that template and I just applied it in Snagit. So all this stuff you're seeing is made in Snagit. This is a screenshot. I used Snagit Simplify tool to simplify the text out of it, and then added these annotations. I added the text and all this. So it's just step 1, step 2, step 3. So all stuff that you can build and create in Snagit, it's all pretty straightforward content. So if I have these in my tray, I'm just going to click the first one and then shift click the last one in the series. So I have these 4 selected, and you can kind of see they're lit up down here. And then right click and then say create video from images. So this kind of puts me into this mode. I brought these over from my Windows machine, and I realized just before our call that this one, the size of this is a little off. I think it's something to do with the resolution from Windows to Mac. But anyway, it basically tries to frame all of the images that you selected in a pretty concise like window that is a 16:9 aspect ratio. So we sort of just take care of that for you. And I can change the background color. So if I want a white background here to kind of make it blend in a little better, I'll do that. And what you see here is it should feel a lot like Google Slides or PowerPoint, where these are sort of like my slides. And I can click to go directly to one, or I can hit this little arrow to move between them. I've got my microphone selected, and I'm going to capture my audio. I actually leave my cursor off, and you'll see why in a minute. And then I'm going to hit record. So what I'm going to do is talk over these. I'll just be talking to you, but I'm not actually going to capture my audio. So let's just turn this off. We won't even bother capturing the audio because this is only going to be a GIF. You could, of course, make this into a video and have an MP4 with the audio, but we're going to show making a GIF. So it gives you this countdown. What I'm going to do is try to leave enough time so that, if you were like seeing this and you wanted to read it and sort of follow along, I'm choosing the pacing here. So I'm just kind of going to give you a few seconds for each one, assuming that your eye is going to go down to the bottom, read the steps, and then your eye is going to go back up and sort of try to see where in this you need to click, and then hit stop. So here's my recording. This came in at 18 seconds. Maybe I decided that this beginning, that's a little too much time on that first one. So I'm just going to select this and cut out the first second.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a good thing. I would always err on the side of recording too much because you can trim a little bit in Snagit, so that's always helpful.
Yeah, I'll do the same at the end, just cut out a second at the end. So now this is currently residing here as an MP4, as a video inside of Snagit, and I could share it out as a video. To make it into a GIF, you click this GIF button, and some options appear here. What we've tried to do is say, here's typical presets that are going to help you be successful depending on what kind of content. I'm going to choose screen video. So high motion video would be like if it was like I had a video of my ducks. We have 4 ducks because we lost our mind because of COVID. So we have ducklings. So for my duckling video, I would choose high motion because those guys are in motion all the time. But for this one, it's lower motion. So we're going to do screen video. And if I want to get in here and customize, I do have some control to optimize and customize the settings. So when I hit that button, it just starts to generate the GIF, and it goes through. And it's going to put it right here into the same tray where I already am. So I'll see it kind of, this one is labeled as MP4, and it'll show up here as GIF, and then it just starts playing through. So it will just, repeat through like a normal GIF, because I said repeat indefinitely in those settings. And if I want to share this out, there's a few ways. I mentioned earlier dragging. I can drag it out of the tray, and it just becomes a GIF right there on my desktop. I could drag it into Teams or whatever. And then, of course, you have the share menu up here where you can send it off to, put it on a slide in PowerPoint. And we haven't really talked that much about PowerPoint, but PowerPoint's a great way to deliver animated GIFs, and it works great. You just have to remember that you only see them moving when you're in presentation mode. So don't freak out if you're in, preview mode and you don't see the motion happening. It will be okay.
And I think you learned that if you have like 50 plus GIFs in a PowerPoint slide, it can be unstable at times.
Indeed, yes. The deck that I used for that animated GIF presentation is a little beefy.
Well, but that's a good thing to note, right? Like, yeah, because I know there's plenty of websites we can go and we can grab GIFs from. Like, you go to Giphy. Anytime you go to like Giphy or whatever, and anytime I bring that site up, my machine starts sounding like it's going to take off because of the fan, because there's so many GIFs playing, and then, I just close it down and I'm fine. But so there is some processor costs with this. It's not like super lightweight free. It does have an impact. So
yeah, that's for sure. And if you're wanting to get a sense of how big the GIF is, you can right click in here and say get info, and it'll show you some more information about it. So this one's 532K. So really pretty good for 18 seconds, half a megabyte. And you could do some things in those custom settings if you wanted to try to get that file size down even more. So that's sort of I mentioned there's kind of 2 ways to think about making GIFs in Snagit. This is sort of I'm going to have one frame of content after another. One of the things I didn't really show you is that I can add annotation during recording. So I could annotate, drawing on these or circling things, and that'll show up too. But that's sort of like next level if you want to do that. Let me show you the other one real quick if we have time.
Yeah. And we do have another question we'll get to, but let's show this because then I think I can answer this other question because it's kind of going to end up being a Camtasia question from Daniel. Cool. Daniel Smith has been asking our questions, so Daniel, we'll get to that in just a second.
So this one, I'm just going to show you, this is kind of a favorite example I have because a lot of people say, hey, do you guys have tutorials as TechSmith? And I'm like, oh, yes, we do. So this one I'm just going to capture directly, right? So I'm firing off a Snagit capture using my hotkey, And I'm going to choose video, record a video here, because it's going to start off as a video. Again, I don't need the audio, so I'm just going to turn that off. And I'm going to hit record. So I get the same kind of countdown. So this is going to be how to find tutorials on the website. So we're going to go up here to support, tutorials, click. Ooh, this is different. Nice, it's got an upgrade. We're going to go to the Camtasia tutorials and then show that you kind of have, all these different ones you can choose from. All right. So those are the steps. It's a, pretty basic few-step process. And yet, it's amazing how many people haven't found the tutorial. So I find that, it's always worth going over here. So back here in Snagit Editor, we can see, wow, amazing. I ended up at 18 seconds again. Must be my norm. Now, I fumbled around a little bit at the beginning here because I didn't have focus on the web page yet. So I'm going to cut that out. And then typically, there's a little bit at the end where it might be, like, okay, I got it. Good enough. And I could cut out things in the middle too if there's like a pause or something. But again, it's just hit this GIF. I'll show you just what's in this custom menu so you get a sense of what's here. It's things like frame rate are going to help with your file size, bringing that down. If there's not a lot of motion, it's okay to be at 10 frames a second. Thinking about the overall dimensions, maybe it's like, actually, this is going to fit in a small space and I recorded it kind of large. Let's go to 30%. And then there's some stuff like this is just a little touch of, I don't know, pizzazz here. You can have it fade through black as sort of an indicator of it's reached the end, it started over. So depending on how the action flows, it might be hard to see, like, wait, did something start over? And so that fade to black can be a nice little visual cue. So this is the process now, 30%. This is pretty small. It might be a little hard to follow. So that if I'm critiquing myself, I would say, maybe make sure that the text is legible. I might have gone a little too small on this one, but you get the gist.
Yeah, for sure. And super easy to make. We literally did that in less than a minute, right? So some of this information, it seems like that, especially when it's common kind of questions that things are going to get asked a lot of. You could make it eat that, because then it's easily shareable. You just have to start building yourself a little library of those kind of common things.
Yeah, and that is nice. You can, literally with Snagit, you can have them in your library and tag. Like I have this demo stuff tag, and so when I'm going to do a demo, I can quickly pull that up. And the same principle if you have things that are your frequently asked questions, like I know that next week a colleague's going to ask me the same one. Hopefully not the same colleague, but.
Create them a web page just for them with just go here. All your questions answered. But I know, even with fun GIFs, I have a list. I have a folder on my hard drive that is just like GIFs that I know, response GIFs that I use frequently. It's like the high five. It's a clapping one or whatever one. So that's really fun. I want to answer. So real quick, Daniel Smith had a question that I want to talk about because I think it's interesting. He says, is there a way to record activity on a mobile device and then work with that recording, add indicators, etc. at the appropriate points in Snagit or Camtasia? And so the cool thing is with most mobile devices, you could just record, like they have screen recording capabilities now. Apple has it. Pretty sure Android has it. And then you could open it up in Snagit and add I guess I don't think you can add in Snagit any annotations if it's already video. It'd have to be screenshots. But you could take screenshots of the mobile device from that video.
Yes.
And then add the annotations in the way that you showed us. Or in Camtasia, you can just bring it in and do all that stuff on the timeline.
Yeah. It would be in Snagit. You would have to kind of go back to a series of screenshots and then sequence those. You could bring in the recording as an MP4 in Snagit. The only editing you would do is just trim out bits, and then you could produce it as a GIF though. So if you only had access to Snagit, you could still do that.
But you could put your marker at a point and say there's the PNG button, or just make it an image button, right? And then you could create your series of screenshots from a video if you wanted the video for maybe other purposes, plus to make a GIF.
Let's show that because it's easier when you see it in action. So if I think about what this recording is, there was scene 1, right? To hit tutorials, support tutorials. Scene 2, go to the page, click Snagit, go to the Snagit tutorials. So it's like these little scenes that are through here. So for each scene, you can just hit PNG, and it will extract that frame from the video and make it, an image. So then you could take these and put them back together and combine them into a video one after another and do all your annotation and narration on top. The other that I was bringing up to show here is our Capture app. A lot of people also don't know about the mobile apps that TechSmith offers, and we have it's really great for iOS in particular, that it captures your screen and then you can actually send it straight over into Camtasia or into Snagit. It doesn't do editing there on the mobile device, but it lets you share it into those. And in Camtasia, you also have another option, which is you can connect your mobile device by a cord.
Yep.
And it'll broadcast the screen of your device onto the screen, and then you can kind of record that with Camtasia.
Although I should mention that is Mac only and iOS only.
Yes.
It's not
Yes.
Not everybody gets that, unfortunately.
That's the pairing. You need to have both of those, yeah. And there are some gestures, though, that ship with Camtasia Mac that then you can add those little gesture annotations.
Yeah, well, for lack of a better way of calling it, context focus, right? Like showing you where you're at and what to look at. So, no, this is great stuff. And Daniel Smith says, thanks for that. There's another question here, or kind of a comment, and I'll just read it because why not? Love showing the process suggestion. Suggestion, make 3 to 5 minute video to teach the process. Very well done, folks. You're helping a lot of people and businesses with your great work in TechSmith. Well, you're welcome. We might even have some information about Animated GIFs on our tutorial page, which you just kindly demoed for us, Daniel. So there might be some information there. If not, we'll take a look at that. But it is pretty easy. You can always replay this video. It will be live on YouTube. We're going to talk about this stuff again. Same basic concepts on Facebook if you didn't get enough of us. You never know. So definitely check that out. But thanks again for the compliment. So Daniel,
we should post, maybe look up some of our best tutorials and how-to content and put them in the description on this.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And I'll post that blog post again because I think that will lead to some other content that we'll talk about using animated GIFs and whatnot, like from the TechSmith blog. Daniel, we are almost at the top of the hour, and I don't want to leave without seeing an example of one of your favorite, we'll call them, again, reaction GIFs, fun GIFs that you've liked to use as you're, doing your work. Because got to have a good GIF.
All right, let's do it.
If I can find
one of my favorite movies of all time is Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and I just love this moment in the movie, and I love this as a GIF that sort of expresses like what, and of course you mentioned the eating popcorn, and so I love the fact that you obviously have the most famous, the Michael Jackson one, but you've got everybody's take on this one, and that's fun. Bring them all together.
And I will say that if and I don't know if you can find them directly on Giphy, but TechSmith actually. We went ahead and we made a series of our own GIFs that we posted on Giphy that we use in social media. So I know there's some of me going doing silly things.
GIFing your boss or other person at your company and having that on hand is, I'm going to say, not frivolous. It's very work related. Keep everybody's morale up. So that's important too.
Yeah, and I will say one of my favorite is a colleague of ours. He was in a meeting. It's an all company hands-on meeting that we record. We're streaming it, and he has this turn, and it's just awesome. It's Guy Larkham, and he's just it gets used quite a bit inside of marketing. I love it. So. Well, Daniel, thank you again for spending some time with me. If people have questions, can they reach out to you anywhere, any place you'd love to hear from them, and maybe they have stuff they want to talk to you about Snagit about? I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I'll put this back. I don't know if you're still showing my screen, but that's my Twitter handle down there in the corner. So it's @Fosteronimo. I've had it for a long time. Can't necessarily explain it. And certainly find me on LinkedIn too. Just search for my name, Daniel Foster TechSmith, and you'll find me, and would love to connect. Yeah,
and I will say that if you all have questions, comments, thoughts, you can leave them in the YouTube comments below. We are monitoring that. We'll do our best to answer that. If you have a specific question for Daniel or for myself, just let say this question's for Matt or this question's for Daniel. We'll make sure people that are monitoring our YouTube channel. If it's not me, it's probably Andy, and he'll let you know. He'll let me know that we've got questions specific from you guys. So thanks again for everybody watching. Just a couple of things again. Remember, if you're brand new to TechSmith, we got free trials you can check out. Go ahead and check out the TechSmith Academy. It is completely free. Go learn how to make things like write scripts and do storyboards and lighting and stuff like that. All, again, free out there for you guys. And I'm going to put on some stuff, just other announcements here as we close out today. Go ahead and check out Camtasia. New version out at the end of April, so it's really brand new. Got some really cool stuff. And thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you again next week.